let's go ahead and start.
Oh, you're recording already?
It's all right. Well, it's been recording for the last 4 minutes, and the part about being real.
You need to tell me.
No, but it's. I mean, obviously, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us begin.
Yeah.
All right. From Querétaro in Mexico. I am in the state of Querétaro.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, Andy?
I'm doing well, and we're on our 9th episode of What's Left, and today we're going to be talking about where you're at and
Yes.
politics in Mexico.
Okay. And I want to apologize to everyone, like I was just saying. I went out last night with my family. We had such a great, wonderful time. I hadn't seen them in so long, so we had Mexican party style, lots of partying, lots of going out and drinking and lots of happiness. So I apologize if I look a little bit rugged, but this is it, and I'm here committed. So we're doing this.
Yes.
So what's left from Mexico? Once again, part 1, right? We're doing part 1, and so this is a weekly political discussion, challenging the political left. I say that every time because I want people to, have an idea when they first begin, that they don't have to start from the very first video that we started.
Right.
And for those of you that have already been watching, please subscribe and share with everyone else.
Yeah.
Now let's begin. So this discussion will be centered around, well, you'll be asking me some questions, no?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when our Socialism 101 thing was about you asking me questions about socialism, but what we did this time is I thought of some questions I would want Eduardo to kind of think about and respond to. So forgive me because I'm going to need my glasses today, so I can ask these questions. So I'll ask you some questions and then sometimes maybe I'll have some things to add on there, or maybe you can say, Andy, what do you think, or something like that.
And very quickly, how is my audio?
Great.
Sounds good?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
So you ready to begin?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question was what brings you to Mexico?
Well, I'm Mexican. Quite obvious. I've been mentioning that in the last videos. Yes, I'm Mexican. So just a little background on that is I was raised in Mexico and I studied in the USA. And as a teenager, my family, my mother would, so she really believed in making sure that I lived in multiple cultures or be multilingual. So even though I was studied in San Francisco, I would spend 4 or 5 months of the year in Mexico. And I would be one of those students. There aren't many now, but I would be one of those students that would come into the school year starting in October, because I take just 4 months, 5 months of the year, and leave in May. So my experience is unique because I also had I spent my summers in Europe when I was a teenager. So I come back every year, just like I was raised to do so, to visit my family and to continue seeing all of the family members that I grew up with, my aunts, my tios, my tias, and to be connected with newer members of our family, as well as connecting with people that I have not really met in the past because my parents are divorced. So I mostly know a lot of the family side of my mother's side, and beginning to meet and even discover new family members as I create my genealogical project, personal project of mine. So that brings me to Mexico every year. The love of my family. We're very family oriented.
Mm-hmm. And now some of the questions I might have are going to be maybe off the script.
Yeah.
we talked about this, is if there's a question that I ask that you're not comfortable answering in light of, politics in Mexico and things like that, you're just going to say that, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so can you say more about specifically where in Mexico you're from and, because I don't know a lot about the different parts.
Yeah. And if I do take up a lot of time, Andy, I'm just going to ramble and rant and just go on.
Yeah.
And if you just cut from wherever you think is just important. I grew up in my parents are from coast to coast. So my father's family is from Veracruz and my mother's family is from Guerrero. I took a genealogical test and I'm 70% Mexican. I want that to be edited out though. I'm 100% according to everyone.
Okay. Jesus.
No one must know I am only 70% Mexican.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's sort of a joke.
Okay.
Because here we're all 100% Mexican.
Okay. I was like, okay.
My mother is actually Southern European mix. No, my mother was born in Guerrero. Most of my family is from Guerrero. So I grew up mostly around Cuernavaca in Morelos because my family moved over to the state of Morelos. And in Acapulco is where my mother was born, which is the mother of all resorts before Cancun, before Puerto Escondido, before Puerto Vallarta. These are all the famous resorts. So, but Acapulco is the first beginning resort, and that's where Mexicans take their vacations mostly, economically. So my mother was born in Acapulco. My father is from Mexico City, and so I also grew up in Mexico City as a child when my parents were together. So I grew up in Mexico City as well as near Cuernavaca.
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly where I grew up, even though my parents are distinctly from different states.
Okay. And what does being in Mexico right now mean to you? Like, what does it call up for you? What's important about it for you right now?
What is important is what brings up for me every time I'm here is just the level of, sometimes I feel a little bit disconnected because I'm so involved politically, just trying to be aware politically in the USA. Sometimes I forget how much is going on here. And when I'm here, I'm like, oh my gosh, all the bus rides I take from one state to another and just looking through the landscapes and seeing how much my country is really just going through the changes as I see Costco and Walmart taking over and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And even Walmart being built near Teotihuacan, which is one of the most precious, third most largest pyramid in the world.
Oh, wow.
It just makes me feel like I am disconnected. These things are happening at a fast rate that didn't happen when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I'm very young. So within my lifespan, there has been numerous changes politically in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that answers your question. No, like that gives me a lot of. It just makes me feel like just the unawareness of what's going on and the population boom that is happening, and the massive migrants that are coming here to Mexico. I mean, I know I grew up with some Cubans, but there are lots of Salvadorians and Central Americans and even Peruvians here in La Ciudad de Mexico, which is Mexico City.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the two things that come to mind for me is that sense of, and I think people in the United States feel the same way, is that the world is moving way faster than they can keep up with. Changes are happening. The gentrification process that seems to be no way to stop it, and yet it's creating all these problems and disruptions in our cities. And so I think that's one thing I relate to in terms of what you're talking about. But also the notion that this question of immigration is not just a U.S. issue, and it's not just a U.S.-Mexico issue. I know that the new president is going to be having to deal with the issues that are coming around immigration between other Central American countries and Mexico.
Yeah. An issue that we'll be discussing is demilitarization.
Yeah.
And his plans for that.
Yeah. Let's see what there's another. What do you believe are maybe sort of America's biggest misconceptions about Mexico, or that that you would want to speak to right now, that based on your knowledge, I don't know. So.
Well, I'm glad that we're doing this in English.
Mm.
I'm also, just quickly, I want to invite a lot of Chicanos and Mexican Americans to watch this video because I think it'll give them insight into Mexican politics. Two things I want to say. One is, anytime I travel, I traveled from in the USA. I would hitchhike in the USA, and I remember everyone would always label me something else, like, oh, you must be mixed, some Native American something, or, and every time I say, no, I'm soy Mexicano, I'm Mexican, people always say you cannot possibly be Mexican. And I'm like, why? My features tell it all. But I think the biggest misconception is that people are uneducated, stupid, especially in the USA. And just like Trump stated, that we are criminals, that we are part of the drug mafia, and there's lots of drug lords in Mexico. It's very unsafe, and it's very disheartening because it doesn't give us an opportunity to be known.
Right.
And one thing I constantly, and I've said this to you, Andy, in the past, like, I feel when I'm in the USA, like, I say I'm Mexican and I'm so proud, but people already have something already there for me that I have no control over, that they are already seeing me as that. And whatever I say and do cannot possibly be Mexican. And I don't want to offend anyone, but, and I hope when I say this, because I'm going to say something, but I was at a wedding before coming here, and I don't mean this to say that. I say this, I don't want to offend anyone, because I know some friends are going to see this. But when people were talking to me about where am I from and everything, and telling them about my background, I remember that someone said a comment. I think they were trying to say, be nice, and to say something positive, but they said something along the lines of like, well, you're not like most Mexicans, or something like that, or, and then it was something else around, you know, you're the exception, and it is sad when people say that. And those comments aren't really positive, but I'm not trying to be, this, he is the exception,
right,
thing, and but people have that. And when I'm here in Mexico, people judge me because of my hair, people judge me because of the way I look, because people judge me because of my character. They don't judge me because I'm Mexican. Everyone here is Mexican. We cannot judge each other because we're Mexican.
Right.
So it's a different experience. And when I'm in Europe, sometimes people will say, yeah, we are. What's it like to travel in Mexico? Because all the propaganda that exists in the media is, El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman, and all the publicity that is being done on Netflix about all the narcotraficantes, all the drug lords, and all that hysteria, and that's what we're known for.
Right.
Well, now Disney's trying to also monopolize on Dia de los Muertos and
Day of the Dead. Yeah.
We'll have that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second, I guess.
Coco, right? Yeah.
Coco, which is a nice film.
It's good. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it was good. There was another one too earlier that was pretty good too. Yeah. It's
the Book of Life.
Yeah, Book of Life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and which is wonderful, but Zorro also before that, you know, and so there's a lot of that that's borrowed about us, but then we don't want them. We just want the culture.
Right. I know you were going to say two things, but so Trump gets his chance all the time to try to characterize you and Mexican people. How would you put it? Instead of not just in the negative, but if you were to give a chance to talk about it, how would you put it?
Well, what Trump talks about, all that crime and gangs and rapists, the very same people that are living here and fleeing to the USA are fleeing from those very same things. I don't know, if there is a population that is like that, that's a population that exists in every country. I mean, I myself have experienced assault in the USA, and I don't all of a sudden attribute all U.S. Americans to be criminals. I've experienced all kinds of things in the USA.
Yeah.
People have assaulted me. People have robbed from me.
Yeah.
I was pickpocketed. in the subway of New York.
Yeah.
This is not just, you know, we try to say, oh, them. And so the very same people, my people are just trying to flee, as well as all Latinos that are trying to go over the border, which mainly right now is the Central Americans. They are just trying to flee from the very same things people are scared about in the USA. And so they are hardworking people. And if you go into any city, whether it be in Chicago, whether it be in Dallas, whether it be in San Francisco, whether it be in Los Angeles, you will see Mexican people constantly very hardworking. And I don't mean to say this, but just stereotype to make anyone else feel bad, but I see a lot of homeless people that are U.S. Americans.
Yes. Yeah.
They have a whole different story that we can talk about on a whole separate video. There's a lot of veterans and stuff like that. Yeah. But they also, and so I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. Not just this is how they, but this is why they have a U.S. citizenship. And there's all the psychological problems that they have, right? But they have U.S. citizenships and paper and documentation to be able to work. And I see a lot of these young and a lot of young people hitchhiking in that stand like on Haight Street in San Francisco, begging for money. And Mexican people don't. There are, but not Mexican people don't do that. Yeah. They go and sell. Stereotypically in San Francisco, you see them selling paletas, right, which are these popsicles. Yeah. Right. You see them, and they sell on their food stands. And they're driving these little food stands trying to sell, and people make fun of them and all these things. And maybe I didn't have those experiences, and we can discuss the differences because I know that I come from a different privileged background. And I'm not a reflection of the most Mexican immigrant, but I know what that is like because I've seen them. And they're hardworking people. They're trying to make a living for themselves, and most Latinos that are immigrating to the USA are just trying to create a better life for themselves. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants the pursuit of happiness. Everyone wants liberty. And they're trying to pursue that in fleeing from regimes that are corrupt, like in Mexico, like in Central America, in Honduras, where I visited, in El Salvador, where I've also been to the capital and I've seen the differences. And our very friend from Nicaragua, who I also went to visit her. Right. So the people are genuine and loving and want to have that dream, which I wouldn't say is a U.S. America dream. I think everyone wants it around the world. Everyone wants prosperity and family that is safe and education for their children. So yeah, I think that I would characterize them as just genuine people that want the very same things as you and I, and that we're not really that different. Right. You know.
And to add, I don't think we'll spend too much time on this, but to add that this violence that people are often fleeing from is not just, it didn't start in Mexico. That it really originates with policies around that the U.S. has. The North American Free Trade Agreement, which has basically been a wrecking ball on the Mexican-U.S. economy, and intentionally so, to basically allow it so that grains and agricultural products that the U.S. can develop much more cheaply than the farmer in Mexico can pass right through that border with no taxes and no tariffs, and it just destroyed the farming industry in Mexico, displacing people from those places into the city, where they are then picked up along the northern border for those what do you call it, the sweatshop zones along the northern border, maquiladores?
Yeah.
And so that's NAFTA, and so an alternative economy has developed around the sale of drugs that the U.S. has been directly involved in around our own drug war, and has been essentially the excuse for the U.S. to militarize their relationship with the Mexican government, to pick sides on the drug war and basically support some cartels who line themselves with the Mexican government and in favor of attacking other drug cartels. This is a part of what's called Plan Mexico, all to allow the U.S. to maintain influence in Mexico directly, so that people like this new president who emerges can't try to, build an independent and alternative path, because the U.S. with the Monroe Doctrine, claims ownership of all of Central and South America. And its policies are directly responsible for the kinds of disruptions that are leading to immigration.
And what is the larger scheme of this capitalist state? Our countries in Latin America are the ones that are exporting these drugs to first world countries. You know, everyone says there's so much drug lords and in Colombia, in Mexico, but the number one consumers of all this are first world countries.
Yes, right.
And everyone is trying to attack us because we're the ones with the mafia, and we're the ones. But there is a U.S. relationship there that no one wants to see, and those are the people, the elite class, trying to make sure that they make money off of these drugs and giving them to the people who are poor in the USA, feeding off of the drugs.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that are traveling over to first world countries. The number one biggest consumer is Europe and the USA.
Yeah. Yeah. You had said there might be two things. That's one misconception. You said there might be a second misconception you wanted to address. I don't know if you remember. Okay.
I forgot. We're talking.
That's okay. If you want to, we can move on to the next.
I don't know if this matters, and I think at some point I have to say it because I think lots of my friends know me. I don't know where we should add this, Andy. I understand I am not, and I touched it a little bit. I'm not a very good example of a reflection of the Mexican immigrant in the USA. And my family, my personal family, and I think I should mention it at some point. My family is middle class. I understand that. I grew up in two countries, and I have a U.S. passport with more stamps than the average U.S. American from most countries, from a lot of countries, not most countries. I meant to say a lot of countries, and I had a very good education, and I went to public school, but it was in the USA, and I have the chance to be economically taken care of by my family. I don't have to work to make money. I'm not because I've never had those pressures that Mexican Americans feel, which is being the first generation to make it to college. It's such a big deal to graduate from high school or to go to university, being the first in your family. In my family, there are so many grads of university, and I don't have those pressures. So I have had the opportunity to explore other areas of my interest. I've never worked a single job that I didn't like. If I've been in a job that I didn't like, it was of my choosing. And so I think it's important for me to call that out because other people have called that out to me. I've never had to live with the fear that my parents would be deported. Does that make sense? And I have double nationality. So I understand that is not the average Mexican experience in the USA. And I can speak to that.
Right.
I don't know where that will fit at some point, but I do think that I was reflecting about this and how people are economically disadvantaged here and why they flee and why they immigrate. I don't always understand those experiences. I know that in my family it exists, but in my family it does. You and I know.
Yes.
But as personal, as a nuclear family, as my personal experience, I didn't have those experiences. Yeah. And I can only be sympathetic to those that are close to me that have had those experiences.
Yeah. Well, you feel free to critique this if you want, but I think that those stereotypes, my suspicion from teaching at Mission is that every family has its own story. And no one family and no members within families fit that, quote, stereotype. That stereotype is really ultimately only a story told to us workers in America to get us to think of workers in Mexico or workers in somewhere else as different from them. So that story does not help us. That stereotype does not help us because it only hurts us to try to understand each other through the lens of that stereotype because it basically separates us and then also misrepresents all these individuals who are within. Like you're not the only person with your own story within within the narrative of the difficult life of a person who might live in Mexico, or what that might be difficult, and the difficult life they face when they come here. So I understand what you're saying, but I just think I want to say that I feel like that stereotypical story almost doesn't exist in any one family, and for us to think it does here in the United States only serves our bosses, only serves the capitalists, doesn't help us understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right.
The election. I don't know if you want to start with the result of the election or the lead up to the election. Which would you prefer?
Well, let's start off with the lead up.
Okay, so tell us about what you know as best you can about what was happening prior to the election of, let's see, Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
Obrador.
Okay. Is it now? I've heard his name said AMLO. Is that okay?
AMLO's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
AMLO is good.
All right.
No one. Yeah.
Okay.
Here in Mexico, we have two last names.
Right.
Yeah, I only tried to use one.
Right.
But we have your father's and then your mother's maiden.
Okay. So, yeah. So, what can you say about the run-up to the election that you know about and that might be informative?
I will just say I will use interchangeably AMLO and Andrés Manuel López Obrador. AMLO is a persistent man. I think the way that U.S. Americans can really relate to him, somewhat, not completely, it's very different. Politics here in Mexico, different. It's not, we cannot put black and white, oh, like the Democrats and the Republicans, no. And I will try. So, he is considered like the Bernie Sanders, although mainstream media has tagged him like Trump in the USA, which is not the way he is not, because he is a populist. So he is more like Bernie Sanders, although he has ran more times than Bernie Sanders. He has ran up to 3 times trying to, back in 2012, even challenging Enrique Peña Nieto. He's been trying to run as a president, He is, we don't have something, not a mayor, but he is el gobernador de la ciudad, which is the Mexico City's mayor. And that position of his has demonstrated how his track record at what he has achieved, supplementing pensions for older folks, fixing transportation, initiatives for education, for preparatory, which is like high school preparatorias, and for universities, for students to go to school, so they're not. Because a lot of times young people will say, well, I need to support my family, so they cannot go to school. And so he was trying to create initiatives. So it wasn't I will mention, it wasn't a big initiative because it was some money, but he did give some money for students to be motivated to go to school.
Right.
And so he has a track record, and he has been a political activist in Jalisco since way before. He has like over 40 years of experience.
Back to the 70s.
Exactly. And he even fought in the community against Pemex, which is the largest
oil company.
Oil company here in Mexico. And he fought against Pemex that was contaminating villages in his native state and other states in Mexico as well. So he has a track record of being a political activist, a people's person, and the people loved him for working for the working class. And when he moved to Mexico City, he said, I will never forget my people from Jalisco. I will never forget my people from other states that I have met throughout my campaigning. And he has been defeated many times, but he always has stood up. He has been defeated, and corruptedly, because people stole away his vote many times. PRI is supposedly, PRI, which is the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, I have the translation here, Institutional Revolutionary Party for our English audience, which has been in governorship for 70 years, since Porfirio Diaz. When we're talking about, like, let's say your political party in the USA is the Republican for 70 years, and that change, Porfirio Diaz was the very first president that we had, because before that there were like, just state governments and different forms of governing, and then they decided to take on the presidency. And he wouldn't let go of power, Porfirio Diaz. And then they challenged him, and then you have this 6-year term that we have now. We don't have a 4-year term, we have a 6-year term. But unlike the USA, we only have 1 term, we don't have 2 terms. So you can be in presidency in the USA for 8 years, only here 6 years.
Okay.
And they, in the PRI, consider themselves to be a member of the International Socialist Union Party. What is it? It's international. Yeah, they consider themselves to be part of this International Socialist membership. Yeah. And I'm like, they're not socialists at all.
All these parties claim some roots to the revolutionary movements for liberating Mexico in that regard. They claim those roots. Yeah.
And so they continue on with that legacy.
Right. That's why they have revolutionary in their names a lot of times. Yeah.
But they're not.
Right.
And they are what I would consider, what most Mexicans would be considered, if you have to have this political spectrum, they're neither like left or right, they're in the center. Yeah. They're mostly in the center.
Yeah.
And so, and PAN, which is the second one, Partido Acción Nacional, which is a National Action Party, they've only been in power for 12 years. By 2 presidents.
Right. And that was considered a big deal when they won, because it broke up the first PRI thing, right?
Yeah. And since then, we've only had this binary system.
Yeah.
But what I do appreciate from Mexican politics as well as European politics, unlike U.S. American politics, is that we do allow for other parties to have debates. Right. Something you can't even have a Green Party have a debate within your televised political debate. I don't understand why. It seems stupid to me. But in Europe, you're allowed to have that. Even in England, you have the Labour Party. You have, it's just different in Europe, and as well as in Mexico. You are allowed to have that.
Yeah.
And we have had this binary system for a while, and for the first time, we've had this now third party. When originally, I will say, AMLO was part of the PRI, but he broke off.
Yes.
And which is part of the reason why I told you that
back in the 70s he was that. Then he was part of the PRD.
Yes. Yeah. Which he tried to form, and he said, you know what, no. So he created Morena now.
Yeah.
Morena, which I'm going to try, I don't know how to, I hope I can, Movimiento de Regeneración Nacional, which is a regeneration movement, national regeneration movement.
Yeah.
I think is a close, national regeneration
the
movement.
Moreno grouping, right?
Morena.
Yeah.
With an A. So, so he created this after third time trying to, continue to win this party, to win the election. Oh, I wanted to mention that, yes, so the PRI is just as corrupt. There was back when there was the elections, what year was it? I will post link for this, where people were voting and they disconnected all the machines of voting, and they reconnected them, and all of a sudden a different candidacy won.
Right.
There's lots of corruption. I will post more information about that. So we've had stolen elections here.
Oh yeah.
And so much,
We have in the United States as well, but
we shall get into that.
Right.
And I think AMLO's a little cuckoo sometimes. The way he's trying to do things, but people love him for it. He is not trying to have any of, most governors here, most presidents want to have so much security around them. And he is like, I don't need them, I'm fine, the people will protect me, and if anyone kills me, it will be within PAN and PRI. So PAN and PRI are like, we can't kill him, I'm not saying that they're planning, but so he's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's it about how leading up. I mean, there was a poll, but no one believes the polls here, Andy, that he was leading in the polls, because everyone's thinking it's too good to be true.
Right. Can I add one thing? And again, I really want today to be your kind of show, if you will, I understand I'm adding in. So, what I've read about AMLO that I want to emphasize in regards to something you said earlier that I think will be helpful to the way, how to understand him as that populist. You said that he is a populist, and he's a left populist generally, although he has some conservative leanings. He's not for, and this is not a criticism at this point. We'll get into that later. You know, just to understand, kind of get a sense of who this character is. He is a left populist, and the way that he, in my mind, the way that he is like Trump is not that because he's a populist, although I would claim Trump as a populist on the right, is the resolve he shows. That he is like Bernie Sanders, but in my mind, here, Bernie Sanders is a jellyfish backbone, you know, not willing to really stand up for those beliefs because he's gonna abandon those beliefs in the context of the Democratic Party. What I've seen AMLO do is stand up for these beliefs and actually call like insurrections, call for like actions in the legislation where he occupies the legislation, or he calls on people to occupy street corners to fight for these things. So he has used his political position to call for demonstrations to support those positions. That is different than any politician we've had here in the United States in quite some time. I'm going to have criticisms.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I'm going to have criticisms later. I don't want to get into that, you know, because it's about, for me, it's about revolution. But it is clear that he's a different kind of politician than has ever been seen in the United States, and that resolve is what makes people very excited, because one of the things that Democrats and even people like Bernie Sanders do is, like we talked about it, people get a sense they're being lied to. With AMLO, I think people are like, we've seen him fight for these things. We've seen him call on us to fight for these things. He actually called himself I'm the legitimate president when the election was stolen. You know, they had their own elections, you know, and their own swearing in of him as president, and he was able to use that position to put pressure on the existing president, who got elected by cheating, I believe, to force that president to take up positions that AMLO and the PRD had fought for, even though they didn't, quote, win the election. So people have seen him walk the walk, and not just in terms of walk the walk in the halls of Mexican Congress or whatever those political institutions, but walk the walk as a person who says, I'm for you, and I'm going to fight with you and ask you. There was a whole thing where during the run of his presidency, he was bleeding from the head from being attacked in his fights against the privatization of gas companies and calling for the nationalization. And it was very controversial that he would show such a thing, but he was saying, well, this is what we have to do. He will say things like this, and much more so in that regard, I can very much understand people's excitement, and why the way that he is like Trump in my mind is the resolve he shows to fight for the things that he says he stands for. Because I think everyone knows here that all the people who say they stand for this are going to back down at the first whiff of opposition, and that has not been AMLO's tradition, and also calling on people to fight with him.
Yes, I agree. There's lots of video footage and documentary. I will link as well for people to see that. I want you to add, Andy, this is not an interview actually. I really want to be able to have this discussion, because I might be missing some points that I cannot come up with. You have to understand, I partied last night. So yeah. That is not to excuse, but so mention things, please mention things.
Yes.
I want you to, because I might forget those. He did, and he organized. If you look at the footage back in the documentary that I had watched, I will link to, all of El Zócalo, which is like a plaza, very big square here, and it's like a Union Square, like the biggest thing in Mexico City, where he organized masses and masses of people. I mean, people love him. Andy. It is incredible. I don't know how to tell that to people, how to communicate that. They feel so connected to him because he has never used bodyguards to protect him. The people protect him. The people literally protect him. I mean, there are people who are trying to confront him, the police, and the people push back with sticks and rocks and protect him, and he's not even wanting to be protected. He goes right in there, and he's also fighting back. And as you mentioned, he has been a political activist where he has been bloodied himself. He puts his life on the line, and that is not a regular politician. I would like to see Trump, being this populist, put himself on the line with his people. Mm-hmm. And that is not for a regular person. And he doesn't give up. And he gives people hope because he doesn't give up. Because he tells them, okay, it didn't work out this time. I'm going to run again because you all called for it. And I was saying in the other video that I think sometimes U.S. Americans must think that Mexican people are disinterested in politics. Mexico has a legacy, has a history of lots of political revolutions and working class people fighting against the elites, demanding for labor rights, demanding for changes in government, and demanding for more social services. And my people have been very oppressed, and even then they still fight back, and you'll see it happening in the South a lot now with the indigenous people, and you'll see it here with after what happened with 43 students having been kidnapped, Ayotzinapa, and people are protesting out in the streets, but the media does not cover it.
No,
the media does not cover it. So
yeah, and you're talking about the U.S. media or the media in Mexico, or both?
I think both, okay. Of course. In Mexico, for sure, they don't want to cover any of that.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the USA as well, they don't cover it because they cover just horrible things about us.
Right. Drug cartel this and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. They don't cover the strength and the resiliency that we have. Which has a
role to basically, one, to make it seem like people in Mexico are all violent and kind of crazy. You know,
and we're ignorant and stupid and don't do anything about our own
government. And secondly, it justifies this continued military intervention and continued political and economic control by the United States with that military intervention. So just to be clear, can you say something about AMLO's party, Morena, because it's an interesting collection of Labor Party and a socially conservative party as well. Do you know much about that?
I know they have el movimiento de Regeneración Nacional wants to dismantle mostly, if you look at their goals, they don't say it outrightly, but they are mostly trying to dismantle how governorship or officials limit their powers. Because here in Mexico, people who represent us are really have so many benefits that the working class cannot. They can access, and we pay for it all here through our taxes. So I know that they don't say it outrightly, but their goals are intentional to dismantle, and that is to dismantle the way that they're ruling, limiting their terms, limiting their pay, yes, sueldo. I'm trying to translate all in my head, and limiting as well the enforcement that they have.
Right.
So
the right to prosecute them for crimes, because candidates have there's real restrictions on the ability to once you're elected to go after you for crimes.
Yeah, when you say that, it's to prosecute them for crimes.
Yeah.
When you say that, I invite anyone, if they can understand Spanish, to look at the debates. They're not like they are not like the debates in the USA. The debates here are like watching a film, like you're watching a Mexican film, or like you're watching everyone's attacking each other, but the way they attack each other is politicians here is just the way that they do it is not very diplomatic. I would say it's almost like Trump style, but not like, I don't want to mention him all the time, but I was saying Obrador, because one of the candidates got too close to him, and he was holding his wallet. He was holding, and then he pointed to the public. I have it still. I have my wallet still. Because he's corrupt, you never know with them. I mean, it was so classic. And then you have other candidates that are talking about like they're gonna chop the hands off of corrupts and criminals and things that you would probably think in the US are like, oh my God, bloody,
Yeah.
But it's the way that we operate here. We're very in your face. So that's the way we are. Mexicans are. We'll tell it in your face how it is and everything. We're not trying to tiptoe around and talk about the weather. You understand?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, what happened? Can you tell us what happened in these elections? and what they mean to you, what the results of the elections mean to you, and maybe people in your family or people you're talking to.
Yeah, I have some families that did not vote for AMLO. So I think I will start there. Some of my family members voted for Bronco because he is calling for harsher policies against crime.
Okay.
But
what party is he in?
He is independent.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just considered independent.
Okay.
He is like, he is calling for similar things. Like, I compare it to Duerte from the Philippines, the president of the Philippines.
Right.
That's what I told my family here. I was like, I cannot believe he is wanting more cameras and more cameras everywhere, which is an invasion of privacy.
Right.
And then he's also calling for chopping off hands of people, and that's torture.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think a lot of Mexicans are just fed up with having too much of the crime as well, and they want for harsher penalties. But that is not the solution.
Right.
That is not the solution. There was another candidate that was the ex-wife of Felipe Calderon, and no one trusted her.
I just want to stop. If anybody in the United States is saying, "Oh, it's so terrified by Bronco," is that his name?
Bronco.
I want you to remember we have two parties that are interested in expanded police and what's it called? In an expanded, kind of like we're going to be in all your business, kind of what's it called? Privacy. Both our parties are involved in that, and both our parties have a long history of supporting all sorts of torture, waterboarding, So don't think that this is just Mexico. Our country, in fact, our country operates something called the School of Americas that trains the South American military in torture and things like that. So, as bloody as what you're talking about is, it can't hold a candle to what our own ruling class has been able to do externally and internally. So just want to be clear.
So they play it, and I would even add to that they play it down or they make it pretty with nice words.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear, like if you're going off, and you should, but don't get the idea that what you're talking about is it's not even close to as violent as our own ruling class is, to be honest. So.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
And you asked, how do I feel about it?
Well, the results also, like he won pretty much by a pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
Like it wasn't even close. He got like 50%.
More than
there
half.
were pre-candidates, candidate. You could have summed up all the other candidates, and he beat their numbers, as far as I understand.
Yes.
It wasn't close.
Yes. No.
Like he lost one time really close, and it was a corrupt, but this one was not close.
Yeah, a lot of people here did not go out to vote for the 2012 elections. A lot of people did not. People don't trust government. People always think, why vote for? You were going to say something.
Yeah, can I ask, what was the voter turnout though? Like I don't know. Do you know if voter turnout was larger? Okay.
I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, but like in comparison to previous elections, do you think it was?
Yeah, a high voter turnout. I have never seen it. In the past, my family always says, I'll show up, maybe I will vote, maybe I will not. What difference will it make? Because you don't trust that anyone is going to validate your vote. But people showed up in the highest numbers, And I was just mentioning a little tidbit of how there was a Mexico World Cup between Mexico and Brazil.
Yeah.
So there was this, and our voting day was on the Sunday before that. So there was a huge frenzy for that. One thing I like here in Mexico is that you're not supposed to be drinking. I don't know if this is anywhere in any state in the USA. At least I know that in California this is not true. But you're not supposed to be drinking on the voting day, because that way you can think clearly and you can go. Because there's lots of partying going on.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's what the results were. Can you say I would say for people who supported AMLO, I guess you and the family members, what are your hopes of that results now?
Well, I think what I will discuss now is just a little bit of how he had his propositions, because I think those are where our hopes will lie. He will a lot of the things that he wants to do, people have asked him, how is it possible that you will be able to cover the costs for all the things you want to do? He's like, we have the money for it. We have the money for it. And the way that we'll have the money for it is we're going to cut, how do you say sueldo? Is income.
Yeah.
We will cut funcionarios, which is officials, the people who are in power, the senators, representatives. Yeah. So we will cut their pay. We will cut their pay. That is one of the things he really wants to do. And he said we'll also cancel the pensions of ex-presidents because they are going home with a large pension.
Yeah.
And he will also, I wrote down these just a little bit, people are wondering, because I want to get these correct. I don't want to say things that are fake news. He wants to reducir el sueldo al menos de la mitad de la presidencia. He wants to also cut back the pay of the presidency. So that means he says, I'm willing to cut down my own pay as president, as well as the officials, as well as the pension. So he will be cutting back on the security. How do you call it in the USA when you protect it's not the social, it's...
Yes, it's special
service.
Yeah. Secret Service.
The Secret Service, yeah. So he's going to be cutting down on his Secret Service because he feels like he doesn't need it. I think he's a little cuckoo nuts because there are going to be people who really hate him and people who are in power will find a way to. And I just hope that he will not be assassinated. All right. The other thing are the social services. So he will increase the pay for, and so instead of increasing for these for people in government, he will then increase the pay for the working class. Who are the working class here? Some of the working class are nurses, doctors, police. This is where I have disagreements. Police, soldiers, teachers, and the Marines. I put that out of order, but the least respected profession here, which some of the least, it's many of them, teachers. Teachers are constantly manifestando, protesting against lower pay, lower wages.
Yeah.
In Oaxaca, we've had this, and in Mexico, La Ciudad de Mexico, here in Mexico City, you've even had this in Guanajuato. There's a history of teachers just constantly trying to get a better wage, a living wage, to try to work. They cannot work. They cannot teach. And sometimes they are having 50 students in a classroom. Right,
not just pay, but work conditions, some of the issues.
The work conditions, excuse me. Yes,
and the fight for privatizing education. They're fighting against that privatization process to make it continue to make it public so that all people have access to education.
Yeah, he is trying to cut the privatization big time, because that was another one that I was going to mention on one of his propositions, that education should be free for all in public and not privatized.
College as well.
Yes.
Right. Not just talking about high school level, he's talking about a free, was it a free college or affordable college? I can't remember. Do you know?
Free.
Yeah.
He thinks education is a right.
Right. Okay. Now, and I also know that he's got policies around amnesty as it relates, like hugs, not something. There's a policy he has around the drug war that is hugs, not guns, or something like that, where he's basically saying we need to reach out to people who've been involved in this criminal activity instead of criminalizing it in the way that, say, Bronco was talking about.
Yes, he does think that people need to have a rehabilitation, like massive, because people end up in those areas. How?
Right.
Why? Because of poverty.
Right.
Because they feel that they have a need to.
Right.
And he feels he needs to get them out of that to give them a better way out.
And that's the policy that I actually heard him beginning to act on, which was amnesty for people who were like lookouts and things like that. if you weren't involved directly in major violence, then he was saying those people should have amnesty and we should welcome them and not charge them with crimes as well as we could, as I imagine, with the idea of finding alternatives.
It is hard for any politician to discuss that issue.
Yeah.
And it's even challenging if you were to ask me in our next video about the drug wars and the things that I can say and cannot say for risk of our lives.
Yeah.
So yes, it's hard, but he has mentioned that the positive things that he will try to do his best to work even with narcotraficantes, which are the ones who are running drugs.
And he has a policy, or he's had some statements around NAFTA. Do you know what those are, or can you?
He is against NAFTA.
Okay.
He's completely against the North American Free Trade Act.
That is not what I have heard. Not like what I have heard. And you can tell me what you know. What I have heard is he was against the current president making any decisions around NAFTA until these elections, and he is calling for a change in. He is saying, I will be able to negotiate a better changed deal in relationship to NAFTA. That's what I've heard. So.
So.
Maybe that's something we can check into.
Maybe I will double check. Why don't we I will double check myself.
Yeah.
Because maybe my understanding around reforming the Trade Act is my understanding of, or I interpret it as like, we're not going to have, exploitation happening here in Mexico.
Yes, I do. But I think what I understood is he is calling for continuing NAFTA, but majorly overhaul.
Reforming it.
Right. As opposed to eliminating NAFTA, that would be a different angle.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the spirit of what he's saying the reform is one that is better for Mexican workers and for Mexico, and in relationship to not so good for the United States and U.S. businesses, and which I think his criticism has been, this is just helping U.S. corporations, U.S. politicians, and not Mexico. It's actually the way it's currently constructed, which is true.
Yes, and I think that I won't talk about it anymore.
Okay.
I think I need to be careful because I need to look into that. I didn't look into it deeply, I will admit.
Yeah.
One thing, I don't, and it's not really a policy, but one thing he promised. So he will be visiting all the states that he had been visiting on his campaign trail, and visiting those very same sites. So he's going to make an itinerary, making sure that he goes back and visits there. He will counsel as well. Politicians have private insurance and have Medicare. I'm such a Californian. Medicare to visit, to have their health being taken care of privately, which is very expensive here in Mexico.
Right.
A private to go to a private clinic, and so he is saying politicians will not have that privilege.
Right. I also heard he was talking about almost like breaking up the political center, and I think I'd heard this, which he was going to basically have certain political offices be dispersed throughout Mexico. Is that true?
Yes, which will be part of his itinerary plan.
Okay.
I think largely what AMLO understands is that he will not be able to change completely the entire Mexico. He'll not be able to. But I think what his strategy is, and from looking at his propositions, is to dismantle the elite politicians that have a lot of control and that buy themselves into having positions of power. And I have lots of criticisms, yes. And the things that you bring up, I want you to bring them up in the next video. I will not touch on them at this moment because I think we should talk about them.
Yeah.
But what I will state, and maybe this can be included in our video for part 1, this one, or wherever you want to put it, is he is really, if you look at his propositions, again I repeat, he is dismantling the very top so that he leaves that as a legacy.
Yeah.
So that when he's out of power, people who go into power he is just taking up the pieces and reordering everything and destroying everything that they have.
Yeah.
Well, he will try to do in the future. He's not doing it at the moment. So that politicians aren't left to their own devices and trying to control in a way that is almost dictatorship,
Mm-hmm.
and corruptly.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's trying to limit their powers so that people can have an easier time to attack and to fight and to maybe revolutionize. Like, who knows, right?
I understand.
But to definitely to challenge politicians in a way that doesn't make it hard and through lots of bureaucracy to get to them.
Right.
And I think that is what he is trying to dismantle, the way that government is formed here in Mexico.
Right. And I actually agree that there's an element which he is trying to do a dismantling. I think we're going to have some interesting discussions and debates next week that might surprise both of us where they come, where we kind of land on this stuff, because there's no question. I think we both acknowledge we are seeing something certainly that U.S. politics hasn't seen, like I mentioned to you, since Eugene Debs, who ran for president outside the Democratic and Republican Party ran for president as a socialist. I know AMLO's not a socialist, but he's a left populist, and he knows that's what he's running as. Eugene Debs ran from prison and collected 1 million votes, during his run. We have not seen a person from the outside of the mainstream political parties in this country in forever, and that's what you're seeing there in a country that has had lockdown on the political process from above, even more so than the United States.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that he was criticized a lot for meeting up with the Venezuelan government.
Chavez, yeah.
Yeah, and with Maduro recently.
Who's that one?
He is the one that got in position of power after Chavez passed away.
Yeah.
So Maduro is now the one in power. And Mexico was afraid because it's like, what message are you giving? But he's like, we are brothers and sisters in Latin America. We're supposed to try to have alliances across, and we're not going to honor what the U.S. wants and just simply have an embargo or sanctions on countries because they do not agree with the form of government that they have.
Right.
So he took it upon himself to go see the Venezuelan government.
Right.
As someone that wasn't yet president-elect.
Right. Right.
And that was a risk.
Yeah.
So he doesn't. So I don't know where you want to add that.
Well, all I can say is that there are a lot of things that are interesting about what's happened in Mexico. I do think there's some opportunities there, but I think I hope people will be interested in tuning in to hear what we say about criticisms. What we say are like, no, this is where this is falling short for what our own ideas of the kind of society we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
we'll see that next week.
Now, some people, I'm not going to hear this, but as I have to double check, some people say he will not even be staying in the White House. Los Pinos, which is our version of the White House, that's why I'm saying it. Yeah. So he says he will not even be staying in that office.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, I will not live there.
Yeah.
I will live amongst the people.
Yeah. Yeah. With this reduced Secret Service.
No Secret Service.
Right.
I was watching Andy. I'm sorry, I'm going a little off topic.
Yeah.
We were friends. So
of course.
Did you see that film, The Purge?
Yes.
Oh my
Wait, the recent one or the old one?
I saw the second one.
Yeah, both of them are dumb.
Oh, all right. Well, I was just thinking after I watched The Purge, I was thinking to myself, this president is going. If we ever have, he's not going to survive because with happening with The Purge, people are just going to go and assassinate him. He wants to live in his home. He doesn't want any Secret Service.
Yeah.
But the people are just going to protect him. I think that's his idea.
Right. So can I ask, because I think we're going to wrap this up soon, because I think next week, I'd like to have next week be where we debate some things, because I think I think there are some real facts we agree on here. I think of overall perspective around candidates like this, who can get people very excited. I think we have some differences of opinion about how to look at it. So that's for next week, I would say. That's what I'd like to propose.
Let us do that.
Yeah,
we can do that.
But let's get the facts down that we all both agree on, in terms, because I'm not disputing this stuff, and I think anybody who hears it would be very excited to hear some of this stuff. Like if we had a president or politician behaving this way, we'd be like, oh, that person's awesome. Particularly, they're not part of the standard establishment parties. You know.
Yeah.
So one, can you say in your mind, what will constitute you saying yes, this was good, this guy really did and stood up for what I wanted? Like, what will constitute for you or for people who voted for him, really seeing him be the person you want him to be, if you will, you know?
I don't think he is the answer, Andy.
Okay.
I will state that. I don't think he is the answer. I have said this in the last video with Ocasio-Cortez. I think if we have people in power like these folks, they are easier to challenge for other demands that we can create for the non 1% of the population.
Right.
I'm talking about the richest 1%. I'm talking about the 99%.
But be careful here. I'm sorry, Robert, but I want to be clearful. You've been clear to say that this guy does not operate like anybody we know in the Democratic and Republican Party, right?
No,
oh.
Not in the U.S. politics.
Yeah, and so we're talking about a different sort of political character that we haven't really seen here in the United States. Closer.
Yes.
So the debate we were discussing was opportunities to make the Democratic Party work, not. So I guess I want to say that. So
yes.
Do you see what I'm getting at?
But what I was trying to get at is that AMLO is not a socialist.
No.
You understand?
Yeah.
He is still operating within a capitalist state.
Yes. Right.
And that it will be easier for people who want to transform, right, a state that is under capitalist influence with someone like AMLO than with someone like Enrique Peña Nieto or Donald Trump. This is my position.
Okay. Or
and yeah, and I think that we are on a path. This is a very big deal for Mexican people because the people are once again with hope to try to create and form. You have to understand, this is one of the bloodiest elections. We've had 136 assassinations of candidates.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And reporters amongst those as well, by the way. I should mention always the reporters. And I think that, and I will mention something, I don't know how to say it, but I myself have had a very distant cousin that participated in a very small town here in Mexico in a political campaign that was killed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there's such, in the smaller towns, it's harder to monitor and to have police not intervene because you have divisions on political ideologies.
Right.
And people don't want change. And there's a lot of politicians who are very corrupt and want to maintain that power.
Right.
So these assassinations happen in the smaller, very small districts, municipalities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What we were ending with is, I don't think that AMLO is the answer.
Yeah.
I don't personally think he is the answer. I think though, I don't want to make you or anyone else in the U.S. audience feel like they don't completely understand, but they don't understand, and I think that in the USA people just do not understand how big of a deal this is for us Mexicans.
Yeah,
this is a very, very big deal for us. Yeah. You have not seen such a dramatic change for a very long time.
Right.
And PAN is not a change.
No.
If they came into power, that is not a change.
Right.
This is a very different change for us. And like AMLO said, hopefully this will also have less, not because of to protect the border or to have Trump be happy, but this will hopefully give people more hope to stay within the country, to fix their own government, to call for a revolution here, hopefully.
Right. I want to say one thing that he did, that the other thing I know that he was talking about was to talk on the Mexican constables that are in the United States to provide more services and protections for immigrants in the United States.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's something else that
he will,
and to work with, he's saying he wants to work with Donald Trump around economic development to help get conditions better for workers in Mexico and not build a wall. I've heard him say things like that.
Yes. Okay. As well as demilitarize the border.
Right.
And not to make the border so both sides of the border as well, because we have the south border
Right.
as well, where Mexico pleases USA to try to really, well, Mexican immigration is very brutal.
Yeah.
Very, very brutal.
Yeah.
And
Right. And he is trying to make it easier and making it less of a brutal situation for people from Honduras or some Central America to immigrate.
A lot of Central Americans that are trying to come here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing. You had mentioned, I don't know if this is off topic, but you had mentioned another candidate that last week that you thought got no attention. Do you think it's worth talking about that candidate right now, or do you do you think it's worth mentioning how that candidate got? Because you were excited about her.
Yeah.
So
I think I'll mention it in the next video when we criticize AMLO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was an indigenous.
Okay. All right. So I think this is great. I'm thinking when I do this video, when you talk also about where you were from, I think I might want to put a little image to give people a sense of where some of those locations are, so that because I don't know a lot about Mexican geography. I'm still learning about Mexican history, Mexican politics, and
oh, we have lots.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know quite the bigger movements. I think, Andy.
Yeah. So
But
I just think this has been very helpful for me, and what I feel like it establishes for a good place for us to see where our criticisms are aligned and where we're going to have differences and where those criticisms go. Because I think that was what I hope to talk about next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
So,
wow, is the video working
how many Skype interruptions did we? How many Skype interruptions do you think we had? I think maybe 9.
I think 6.
Yeah, or something like it was, but I think we've done well. So
I think I'll have a better connection. I mean, this is one of the best connections I've
I don't know
had
what's
here.
going on.
I don't think it's actually this home.
Yeah, I think it's. I think there's a pernicious government is entering somehow to try to make this, but they cannot deter us. They cannot deter us. So people should, if they like what they heard, subscribe, like. Oh, but the most important is share this with other people you know.
Yes.
And there's also I'm going to get. This is going to be on iTunes pretty soon. Like I'm starting to get episodes on iTunes. I figured out how to do that, so they're going to get back to me. So hopefully we'll have another way. Other than that, join us next week, right?
Yes, please join us next week.
Yes.
We will be discussing part 2.
Yeah, and I would say go ahead, drink it up, and come back and be ready. What the day? Eduardo, thank you. It's great to see you. Great job. And we'll talk later, but also we'll talk next week. All right, so we'll see you all next week.
We will see everyone until next week. Thank you all for, please like and please subscribe and please share with all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.